Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. Well, Anthony and I have been very busy conducting CEO interviews over the last few weeks. It's nice to get a breather and get on a traditional podcast, hear you guys talk about some of the industry news and events that have been going on over the past few weeks. Now, in today's video, we wanted to obviously talk about the Stronghold Bitfarms deal. In addition to that, we've been hearing a lot of HPC conversation. Wanted to discuss this narrative in more detail. And of course, Bitcoin price, hash price, and transaction fees, which are very interesting this week for a number of reasons that we're going to talk about in today's video. Now, before we get into all that, please take a second, smash that like button, you guys, faster than a 2-cent PPA. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comment section below, what were your key takeaways from this week's interviews, your price target on Bitcoin in the last few months of 2024, and your outlook on the HPC Bitcoin mining sector in general as we start to see the price of Bitcoin increasing. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, Anthony Power and I are back in action, a traditional podcast. And Anthony, it's actually quite refreshing for us here. There's been a lot of news going on over the past 2 weeks. We've obviously been very busy with earnings interviews. So it's a great opportunity for us to come on here, talk about what we've been hearing from these CEOs in relation to HPC. Obviously the Stronghold deal we'll get to today as well, expansion news. But a lot's been going on in the Bitcoin community as well, Anthony. So I wanted to talk about some of the recent events, Bitcoin price. We're starting to see some pretty good price action. As you say, higher highs and higher lows, which is a real refreshing thing for those Bitcoin maxis who've been waiting around like we have, Anthony. So first and foremost, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? And what was your take on all the interviews that we've conducted over the last few weeks?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. It's been a busy fortnight since we got back from Nashville. We've interviewed so many of the CEOs. We've got more next week to come, some early in September, as well as results still come out over this period from that quarter. But yeah, some really good insights into what's happening in these companies, and a lot of your questions out there were asked as well. So, great for the for putting those questions forward. But yeah, it's very positive, and like you say, a lot of the conversations that we had with the CEOs were around about the HPC, which is the conversation at the moment. We're not going to deny that. We've talked about it for 3 or 4 months now on the podcast, and it doesn't seem to be letting up one bit. I think all waiting for now is we're waiting for the next big announcement from one of the miners to say they've landed something along the lines of what Core Scientific have already landed not once but 3 times in the last couple of months with all their extensions. So if we see a sort of a deal like that coming to the table, this isn't a one-off. This is really positive news for the space, and it gives these miners an option on how they're going to get a return from their power and infrastructure. And that's what it's all about. And if you listen to Sam yesterday on the podcast, it's about driving a return on investment on the power they've got. And at the moment, it looks like they're fully focused on delivering HPC and putting a bit of a pause on the growth in Bitcoin mining. So not stopping Bitcoin mining, but just pausing the growth of Bitcoin mining. And until we sort of see the Bitcoin price rally, it needs to rally further than where it is at the moment, even for the pure play miners, never mind the comparisons with HPC. But yeah, no, a great 2 weeks and a lot to talk about.
Yeah, thinking back through those interviews, Anthony, there's a few numbers and situations, I guess, that come to mind. So I wanted to ask you kind of your top memories from the last few weeks as well. For me, one that came to mind yesterday, Sam Tabar saying 130,000 is now kind of the new intersection point in terms of margins between Bitcoin mining and HPC. That was really interesting. We also had Tyler Page on for the first time from Cypher, so got to learn a lot about the Black Pearl site, that construction update. And then interestingly enough, Anthony, you talk about Sam Tabar kind of pausing on the exahash expansion. That was a very similar tone to what I felt from Gryphon as well. So they had a 6 exahash goal. It sounds like Rob and team are really focused on that HPC opportunity. So you've been saying for months now, Anthony, for these sub $100 million market cap miners, they really need to think outside of the box to be able to grow. And it appears they're now starting to do that, hey?
Yeah, they are, but it's not just those smaller companies. We also had Patrick Fleury, and the one interesting aspect of Patrick Fleury, the same as with Sam is, yes, they're going to get to their 13 exahash this year, but they've given no guidance for next year in terms of growth of hash rate, and that's unusual for what I'd say is one of the bigger miners out there. You know, they're imminently at 10 exahash now. And, you know, they were sort of in that chasing pack behind the likes of, you know, Marathon, CleanSpark, Riot, you know, going all guns to get the hash rate up. And they had the power on those sites to deliver far more hash rate next year. But clear indication from TeraWulf that they're focused on HPC. And it might be that the next big announcement comes from them. There's speculation, of course, like, you know, but they're certainly geared up to delivering something, and it's not a case of, you know, building in the future. So with Tyler, you know, he talked about 2027 in terms of the 4 sites that they've sort of like purchased or basically sort of like, you know, made their option to purchase these sites. I think it was like 1.7 gigawatts of potential in those 4 sites there, 3 at 500 megawatts and another site at 200 megawatts. So he's doing that, but the time frame isn't now. You know, the market will be looking for revenues, and, you know, Core Scientific are going to deliver revenues from early in 2025. We've already had Sam on there delivering. They've been delivering revenues for the last 8 months, and will continue delivering revenues there. TeraWulf have got the site. Yes, they'll have to obviously refurbish some space and build the infrastructure required. But no, you know, for them it could be a lot quicker than some of these other miners. So it'd be interesting to see who announces. Yes, we do need another miner to come out and say, "Here's a deal." And then we know it's not really just a one-off, because it is CoreWeave with Core Scientific, and they've got a relationship that's been going on longer than people realize, actually, in terms of hosting. So yeah, it's going to be these next few weeks or months, and things move really fast in this space. You know, be keeping our ears to the ground, our eyes wide open, seeing what happens next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Anthony, you're exactly right there. When we start to get multiple contracts in this space, I think that's going to prove, hey, you know what, the CoreWeave deal wasn't a one-off. Another thing we've been hearing is as soon as we get one of these hyperscalers to sign on, a Google, an Apple, an Amazon, something like that, that's going to bring a lot of focus. And interestingly enough, Anthony, both Mike Alfred and Bitcoin Magazine posted, I'll throw it up on the screen here, a visual talking about Bitcoin versus miners and the AI opportunity, or the HPC opportunity for these Bitcoin miners on primetime television. So the thesis is starting to get out there. For a long time, Sam Tabar and the likes of these CEOs were saying, hey, you know what, we're not getting recognition for our HPC opportunities here. And it seems like the Wall Street of the world and the big bankers are starting to realize that. Another interesting stat, Anthony, 60% now of hedge funds have some sort of Bitcoin exposure through the ETFs. We've seen tremendous amount of inflows over the last few days, and really starting to see that optimism come back into the Bitcoin side of the equation here as well. So my question for you, Anthony, is how do you think these companies should play the strategy right now? Is betting on HPC and the consistency, knowing that Bitcoin mining is getting more difficult, the way to go? Or do you think companies like Marathon that are betting the farm on Bitcoin going up will ultimately pay off?
Cycles have told us that Bitcoin price will rally post the halving. We're in that sort of period now where we expect to see it move, and we've seen some signs. It's gone from 54,000 up to 61, 62,000 in sort of like the last week or so. So we are seeing a little bit of movement now, but we need to see new all-time highs soon, and then a move from all-time highs to sort of like really get into that bull market. Going back to your previous point, we highlighted this for the last 2 months or 2.5 months with regards to the conversation from Wall Street. They're not interested in Bitcoin mining at the moment. Bitcoin mining could be something that, the future when the price really gets to where it needs to. But HPC is all the talk. And every miner that we spoke to this week, and we asked that question, how's the phone been ringing returns of Bitcoin mining or HPC? It was HPC they're all answering to. So that conversation is slight there. But like you say, we just need that other deal. The hedge funds, I mean, that when you told me that statistic, that was amazing. I mean, bear in mind, before 2024, none of these hedge funds could touch Bitcoin because of the rules, and now they've got vehicles to do this now. So it's really positive for the space to know that a significant amount, 60% of all hedge funds have got some sort of crypto. That's a significant amount, and that's likely to rise. So we will see it. The Maras and the CleanSparks and the Riots, the pure players, they've got a strategy. And end of the day, go back 3 months ago, we weren't even talking about HPC. HPC was it was being done in smaller. Well, we say small. I mean, Bit Digital got a good contract this year. They've got a new customer with potential to be a massive customer. And they're spreading their risk by having more than one customer. So that's positive news there. But you had Hive and IREN. In terms of revenues, we're looking at approximately like $1 million a month. So it wasn't really big conversation. The core, we've changed that conversation. But before then, it was all about Bitcoin mining. And we haven't changed that. And every CEO we spoke to has clearly said, we're staying with the mining. Some of them now said we're not growing until we see more potential, because at the moment there's more return on HPC for delivering these types of HPC hosting contracts, where you don't have to go out and purchase, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of GPUs. You let the client buy the GPUs. They put them into your facility. The client agrees, an energy contract, agrees the uptime of those of that contract. And it works really well that way. You get a really good premium for what you're delivering. So it's a real positive space to be in. I think long term Bitcoin mining will certainly come back into the phase. You've got to look at the last 4 cycles to see where the expectations this year. But as I say, I let the likes of Freedom and the gang determine what the Bitcoin price is going to be, and then when it doesn't get there, we'll get him on the podcast, and he can explain why then. So
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, a real spectrum is coming into the space, ranging from the dedicated pure play hodlers. You can see on the screen here, a shout out to Hodl 15 Capital. This account posts just awesome content, shows the top 27 publicly traded companies. So you're right there, Anthony. There is just about 30 actually, ranging from Marathon Digital with 25,000 Bitcoin. Riot in second place, 9,700, Hut at 9,100, and then all the way down the row to zero, Anthony. And if you look at this table, it's approximately a 50-50 split between the miners that are hodling and not. So again, really seeing that spectrum of different approaches and strategies here, which is super exciting. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, Anthony, you talk about Bitcoin price moving up. We've also seen some really interesting things going on with hash price and transaction fees. So why don't we spend a couple minutes on this, because this is obviously a real breath of fresh air for the miners as well.
Yeah, we saw a spike yesterday in the transaction fees, where if you think about where the actual rewards in terms of putting it into hash price, we're sort of hovering around $43, $44. So yeah, the transaction fees yesterday absolutely ripped yesterday. And this was all down to the Bitcoin staking protocol Babylon, and the rush to stake Bitcoin on the platform. From looking at it from a SAT point of view, it pumped the fees from 5 sats all the way up to over 1,000 sats per byte just in a matter of blocks. And actually, Bryce, me and you witnessed one of the blocks last night. I think it was Mara. One of their blocks gave out 9 Bitcoin. And so, bear in mind, a typical block would be 3.2 Bitcoin. But we saw some big blocks coming out yesterday, But again, as soon as it went up, it's back down, and the current price now is back down to 44, 45 dollars per petash. But these things can happen, and when you've got sort of like 20,000 transactions competing for certain spots on the blockchain, then you're going to get some sort of surge in the price over that period there. So that was an interesting yesterday. But again, it's not like it's happening consistently, delivering these rewards to the miners. So we know now with the price it is at the moment that even some of the miners on that table you just had up before, the 27 there, some of them will be struggling at this price. What was interesting to hear from some of the CEOs in terms of hash price, looking at hash cost, in terms of how they're able to bring in these really more efficient miners. Some of them now got cheaper energy. I think the conversation with Asher and Sue surprised me in terms of they know they've got one of the most sort of like least efficient fleets of all the miners in North America, of the big miners. I think it's somewhere around 30, just over 31 joules a terahash. And if you compare that to say CleanSpark, who's at just over 22, and a load of other miners in that sort of 23, 24, that effectively means that Hooked would be paying probably like a third more in power cost just based on the actual efficiency of the machine. Then you've got the other part of the variable, which is actually the energy cost. Now, the good thing for Hooked, which has brought their cost to mine down considerably, is they've gone from sort of like 5 cents a kilowatt hour down to just over 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So that puts them in that sort of like top echelon with the likes of Cypher, with the likes of Soluna, with the likes of TeraWulf, getting a really, really cheap energy cost. And we've talked about this many times on the podcast. There are a number of things that you have to have in place. You have to have an efficient fleet. You have to have cheap energy costs as well to deliver a great total energy cost, for your mining, because that's your biggest cost. You can't really control too many costs there, and the energy cost, if you don't pay the bills, you ain't going to get the power. So, by doing the things more efficiently, getting the best machines in, that's why these companies are getting these, these T21s, and we talked about, T21 hydros, and these are massively more efficient than the machines a couple of years ago. And also in terms of size, they can fit in the same space as the S19. And if you've got the access to increased power, you can really ramp up your hash rate without actually increasing the size of your building. So
Speaking of that, Anthony, just a quick plug. This weekend we have a special coming out on Rousseau, which does immersion mining. So you talk about pushing machines to their max. I'll get your comments on that in one sec as well.
Yep.
I just wanted to circle back for a minute, you guys. Anthony had just said the average block is around 3.2. That it's 3.125 obviously, but the transaction fee is working out right now to about I think we calculated 1.6% last night, Anthony. So very low transaction fees, except for this phenomenon we saw yesterday. And you're right, Anthony and I were watching the blocks on Meme Pool. You can actually see the amount of transaction reward per block and which pool.
So if you take a block where Mara received 9 Bitcoin, and if you think about the rewards for that block would have been 3.125,
yep,
and then look at the transaction fee of normally just 0.05, and that 0.05 compared to effectively 6, that's the sort of increase in the transaction fees. That's how it spiked so much. That's a massive increase, but it was for a short period of time. I mean, I think as soon as we were seeing that block, we saw the next block and it was back down to sort of like 3.2. So
just like the halving, remember that trebling?
Like the halving. Yeah, exactly like the halving. Again, it wasn't, the halving was a little bit longer in terms of, I think we went for about 2 or 3 days. This was like literally, I'm going to say, in terms of hours, it literally was just probably hours, maybe a couple of hours, an hour to get to that top and an hour to get back down again there. So, but we've talked about before, if the Bitcoin price doesn't rally, it might be that transaction fees have to be, incurred to keep the miners mining and, monitoring and providing security for the blockchain to make the wheels go around, because they've got to, miners have to, those that are on the global hash rate, have to be able to do this profitably. Even though we just talked about the great benefit of these new machines here, not every miner can afford T21 mining machines, by the bucketful, like some of the bigger miners have done by raising capital through their ATMs. I mean, some of the smaller miners just haven't got that ability, so they're buying some, but they're buying in small batches, and a lot of it's, and now some of these smaller miners, what they're doing is, rather than growing, they're actually replacing machines. So they're becoming more efficient, and keeping that power cost down there, so they can manage longer and longer. Because obviously everyone wants to grow. If you can't grow, you've got to be more efficient with your cheap energy to maintain your business.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, I just mentioned the special with Russell. For a little context, you guys, when Anthony and I were in Nashville, we ran into a number of industry professionals, I guess. So not necessarily Bitcoin miners, but related parties. So Russell is going to be on this weekend going through a deep dive into immersion mining, even the possibilities of using immersion for HPC. Another big name we met in Nashville, Anthony, coming up next week is Dennis Porter. He's on the on the Tuesday. He leads the Satoshi Action Fund. So some really interesting characters in the space. Interestingly enough, speaking of travel, Anthony, we also got a call from the Bitcoin convention to be speakers in Amsterdam. So we've also been busy booking flights and hotels over there. So if you guys are in that region of the world, you're thinking about coming, we'd love to see you there. We're going to be hosting a power mining meetup. We also got a promo code 10% off if you want tickets into the event, the Bitcoin conference. The code is Power Mining. So Anthony, a lot going on there, but it's great to see this community really starting to embrace the channel and come on and give some educational bits, eh?
It's great, and I was fortunate. That was my first Bitcoin conference, was the Amsterdam conference last year, whereas I was actually a speaker at the conference. So I wasn't even a host or a moderator. I was actually on the panel speaking, and I was sat next to Aidan Killick from the CEO of Hive Digital, and Nazar Khan, who's the Chief Operating Officer of TeraWulf, and Amanda Fabiano, who's a great name in the space. She's the director of TeraWulf. She's the former mining chief of Galaxy. She basically led the deals to buy the Helios site from Argo Blockchain in December 2022, just before Argo were sort of like tipping to go into Chapter 11, and that gave them basically a helping hand to keep liquid. So she was the moderator, and it was a great experience. And I tell you now, if you haven't been to a Bitcoin conference, you've got to make the effort to go to one of them. Because there's a lot of great people there. I met so many people at Amsterdam that I've kept in touch with. Still see people now, and I'm looking forward to catching up with people again in Amsterdam. So if you're in that area or you want to get across to Amsterdam, go on the link there. There's a discount on the link there, and it'd be great to catch up with you. Bryce himself is going to be in Amsterdam for a few days, even a day or so either side of the conference as well. So we might have the opportunity to catch up with any of the followers during that period. But it'd be great to catch up at the conference. It really is good, and also you'll bump into some of these CEOs, and they're just like me and Bryce. They're normal people. If you've got some questions, they're always there. They'll answer questions. I was stood there last year with I was in a group just chatting away, and there was Ben Gagnon, who we know now as the CEO of Bitfarms. There's the chief operating officer of Marathon. There was the head of IR for Riot. There was a core scientist. There was a group of 6, 7, just having a chat and just catching up on how things were in the space. And everyone's really friendly. That's the thing about Bitcoin. It's a great space to be in. Everyone's learning. Nobody's an expert. You see all these people. We're not experts. I'm learning every day. Every day is a new day. Learn something new every day, and you'll never stop learning in this space.
Learning.
I don't progress to be any sort of an expert. I've just spent the last 4 years learning, and it helps me able to sort of analyze and look at these companies and prepare for these podcasts that we do. But no, they're great conferences. There'll be some great speakers at the conference. I'm not talking about Bryce myself. There are some big names coming to the conference, and it's just great to be there. It's a great atmosphere. Everyone's there for the same reason. They're all orange pilled, and there's a lot of there's a lot of social things going on as well at these things. So get yourselves down to Amsterdam. It's a great location. It's a fun location to be in.
No kidding.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Bryce.
I am as well. I've never been to Amsterdam. I'm going across the pond the other way. I misspoke though, Anthony. It's the 9th and 10th of October, but you're right. We will be in town on the 8th as well. Speaking of learning, Anthony also had a computer crash this week, so we've been teaching him MacBook skills. He's upgraded to the world of Mac, and there's a little bit of friction going on there with some of the keystrokes. But anyways, Anthony, enough about all that. I wanted to get your take now on Bitfarms Stronghold, because we weren't able to cover this, obviously, with all the interviews. This is a major, major announcement, especially in light of the hostile takeover bid from Riot, right? Anything that Bitfarms can do independently to strengthen their internal company and exahash and power portfolio and all the rest, I think solidifies them and makes them a little bit more difficult to take over. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on Stronghold, specifically the purchase price, the strategy, the amount. What do you think here?
Yeah, it's a good acquisition, and we've talked about M&A activity in the space. We've talked about a narrowing of those numbers of miners out there going forward, and this was articulated a couple of years ago that in sort of like a few years to come, there might just be 5 or 6 big operators in North America. Could be the sort of start. We've seen quite a few acquisitions this year. We were expecting more in 2022, and the Bitcoin price got to sort of like heading towards $15,000. And we didn't really see, we saw some Chapter 11s, but we didn't really see any sort of like big takeovers or acquisitions like we've seen this year. So we've already seen the likes of Riot take over Block. We've seen the likes of CleanSpark buy Grid. Now we're seeing Bitfarms, which looks like the biggest of those 3 deals, take over Stronghold Mining. Now this wasn't a secret in terms of Stronghold Mining, 5 or 6 months ago, put themselves on the market anyway with one of their announcements saying they were open to offers. Again, if you look into the Bitfarms deal, this is a conversation they've been having for 3 years with Stronghold Mining. So this isn't something that happened over a weekend. This is a long-term plan for Bitfarms. So I'm not going to really say it's actually there to spike Riot Platforms' option to take over to Bitfarms. I mean, from Riot, it just makes it the fact that there's an extra 4 exahash that's coming online. So it's an even bigger company that they potentially could be buying. But that'll be decided in the future. That's not for us to decide. We're talking about Bitfarms down Stronghold. So Stronghold have got a couple of sites there. They're operating at 4 exahash. They've got quite amount, in terms of short-term capacity, they've got like 307 megawatts of short-term capacity, and longer term, up to like nearly 1 gigawatt of power there. So there was plenty of potential in that deal, and it looks like it's a good deal. I think in terms of the price, I think it was 125 million. In terms of it'll be a share swap. So those Stronghold shareholders will receive, I think, something like 2.5 Bitfarms shares for every Stronghold share they have. And so that priced the deal at about 120, a total of 175 million, but 125 million equity and 50 million in debt. So we know that Stronghold had some debt on the balance sheet, and we've talked about this before. When you're buying a company, you're buying everything in the company. We talk about enterprise value. So, a company might have a market capitalization of 100 million, but if they've got, say 10 million in cash and 60 million in debt, then the enterprise value would be closer to $150 million. That's what you'd end up having to spend to sort of buy that company, because you're buying the debt as well. On the actual balance sheet. So Stronghold had debt, so Bitfarms will take on that debt and obviously look to determine. I mean, Bitfarms have just spent the last 20 20 months getting their debt down to zero. So I would imagine that they'll have another strategy in place now to reduce that debt, or maybe to use better financing to pay less interest on that debt there. But a really good acquisition. Again, 4 exahash with plenty more potential. So it just helps Bitfarms get to, not so much about this year, because they had their strategy to 21 anyway, but it helps them get closer to where they wanted to be next year, which was 35 exahash. So this is another 4, but it also comes with potential for more megawatts to provide more Bitcoin mining. And, this could have some of the sites that they might want to utilize for HPC as well. So there's an option, I suppose, there, because I don't think Ben's totally discounted HPC. I think, conversations, are being had. And it wouldn't surprise me if they had a plan to utilize some of their sites for HPCs. They're not, I don't think they're going down the route as a pure play miner. I think they're open. Cypher are open. I mean, in fact, going back to Cypher, do you remember Tyler said...
Just one sec before Cypher. I just wanted to say, Anthony, that 2 things. So number one, so you're effectively saying the all-in purchase price was 175 million for 4 exahash. So that's like 45 million per exahash kind of ratio is what we're talking. So that's interesting, because prior we were seeing closer to about 100 million per exahash.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the additional power pipeline that Ben gets from this. The other thing I just wanted to quickly say, Anthony, is geographically what this does for Bitfarms is it really changes their portfolio mix from being centered on Canada and South America to getting some good US exposure as well, which again, for HPC, a lot of people care where their data is hosted, right? And the US is obviously a fairly safe place to host that information. So I just wanted to call those out, and then now we can jump back to Cypher here.
Yeah, no. I mean, the US presence potentially now could be like literally half their mining could be done in the US based on the fact they've just purchased this company. So that's really good. But in terms of Cypher, if you remember, I asked the questions, Tyler, about if an offer came in that was too good to turn down, would you consider redeveloping Black Pearl to fit HPC hosting instead of Bitcoin mining? And he was adamant, he would do that if the right deal came along. So you've got a few miners that are going to stay pure play and they're not going to budge from that, but you've got the majority of that list that you saw there that they want the deal, they want that core scientific deal. Because it's a great deal. We've said it so many times, and the space, like Wall Street likes it. The lenders will like it as well, because the great thing about HPC is that predictability gives you more opportunities to leverage. You can borrow, have less issues borrowing against Bitcoin mining. We've said it time and time again. We don't know what the price is going to be, so it could go up to 100,000. We all hope it goes to 100,000, and we hope it goes to 200,000. Don't get me wrong, but it's at 61,000 today. It ain't 100,000. So, and we've had all-time highs, in March this year. So, it's just not predictable enough for the bank to turn around and say, "Here's a great deal." But HPC, those revenues, those costs associated are predictable. Most companies, the cost structure is pretty much manageable. They can manage their own costs. G&A costs, they can spend it or not spend it. It's down to them. So that is manageable. And with HPC that the revenue lines will be by contract. So every month you'll get your payment, and then you pay, and in that core scientific deal, Corp haven't even got to worry about the energy cost. The energy cost goes straight to Core Weave. So that's a fantastic deal.
Now, you mentioned SG&A. I can only imagine how much these SG&A lines are going to go up once they actually have to have a sales and marketing team to find these HPC clients. That was another big discussion point with Sam yesterday, is he used the term atrophied muscles, but he basically said, hey, look, as Bitcoin miners, all we have to do is go out there, mine Bitcoin, and sell it into the network or hodl it or whatever. You don't need any sales marketing staff. The big component with HPC, even if you have the infrastructure, the GPUs, and the power is you need to find a client. So that's going to be kind of the next event.
That's a great point, Bryce. And actually just take that a stage further. So you've got to find the sales team. Then you've got to be customer focused. So you've got to deal with customers. You've got to get paid by the customer. You've got to manage a contract with the customer. So everything does change with HPC. And depending on what model you use, I mean, I think it's going to be less of an issue for the likes of Core Scientific because they have one big customer. I don't envisage Core Scientific will employ 20 people in the sales team to deliver that contract. That was probably conversations, at the sort of director level to say this is how we're gonna do it. Are you interested? Bear in mind, Core, we've actually made an offer for Core Scientific, which was flatly turned down based on the valuation that Core Scientific believed the company was worth, and they were rightly to do that. If you look at the share price now, the valuation now, it's massively different from where it was in June. But these companies that are delivering what I would say is like an on-demand service. So you build a sort of like tier 3 facility, you put your GPUs in there, and then you basically offer the services of those GPUs to customers. And customers can take as much or as little as they want, and there's a price per hour in terms of in terms of paying for service. And so therefore you need a team of people to deal with customers, to make sure you get your payments. I mean, these companies haven't had to do that before. Bitcoin mining, you're not competing against anyone. You're mining Bitcoin, end of. The price is the price. You sell your Bitcoin on a daily basis, you hodl, whatever like that. You'll have maybe some finance strategy teams to determine how you're going to raise capital. But the actual day-to-day, there's no sort of marketing or sales team required, but you're going to need that for certain elements now, this HPC, depending on what model route you're going to do. And yes, so that does bring in a little bit of a hindrance to some of them, but I think not so much a hindrance for Core Scientific, maybe a hindrance for some of the other miners that are going down a different route in terms of this demand service.
Yeah, it certainly is. It'll be interesting to watch. The other point you just made there that was interesting, Anthony, is everybody's got their price. And we've heard that from the likes of TeraWulf. We've heard that from the likes of Tyler Page at Cypher. A lot of the smaller miners, obviously, looking at M&A. And ultimately, it's true, Anthony. If enough money is there, you and me will figure out how to run a GPU cluster if someone's paying us enough. So it'll be interesting to watch. But right now, I think the big topic is what is Bitcoin going to do? Anthony, you always say Bitcoin does what Bitcoin does. And boy, I hope it starts to make a turn upwards. So we'll see how that continues. I'll give you a chance to say final thoughts here then, Anthony. And we'll see you guys here next week, back for regular podcasts and our live production on Wednesday.
Yeah, no, it's like you say, go back to the discussions we've had. We've had some fantastic discussions. Really, if you didn't get a chance to see some of these, go back and have a look. We don't just do them on YouTube. All these podcasts are available on Apple, on Amazon, on Spotify, on 17 other platforms as well. So, and we're seeing a rise in the numbers of people that must be listening to podcasts in the car when they're driving. And so, that's good. You've got access to these podcasts. You don't have to look at me and Bryce. You can just listen to us in the car. And I've listened to quite a few of the podcasts. I haven't done every interview. So when Bryce will do an interview on his own, I'll generally listen to it on a podcast of him driving. So it just, and the quality is good. It's it's another alternative. But we also want you to watch the YouTube video, put your questions in there, put your comments in there. There's been some really, really good interviews this week. I was really impressed with a lot of the miners that came through, and everyone seems positive. That's the thing at the moment. I was expecting to see some sort of people feeling a bit down, but everyone's very optimistic about where the businesses are at the moment. They seem to be all doing the right thing.
They were happy to book in too. They all came flocking in right when the earnings came. So no,
absolutely, they all want to be on the Power Mining Analysis podcast.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do.
And I was going to say, Anthony, as well, we've got some really good questions this round for Q2 from the subscribers. So for anyone who's submitted questions, we appreciate those. Great to get those answered directly from the CEO. So there you have it, you guys. A lot going on in the space. No shortage of news, as we like to say here at PMA. If you're still watching the video at this point, you guys smash that like button quicker than a 2-cent PPA. Subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comment section below what you think of the interviews, price target or price action in Bitcoin, and this HPC narrative. Thanks so much. We'll see you here tomorrow.